Good evening. This is our week 11 and probably our third week of the coronavirus as it's hit Nebraska. We've had a couple of cases in town, which means there may be quite a few more. I'm sheltering in place. Kind of easy to do with online classes and everybody's gone, seems like. Hope you like my shirt. Found it. I have several of these, but this is the only one that's still decent to wear. Anyhow, I would like to talk about differentiation. Now, we got a chapter on practice and application coming up next week, and I haven't usually emphasized that as much. I would very impressed with your discussion over strategies. I'm getting ready to do the interviews now. Feedback on those. I would like to take those strategies and kind of do like a booklet or something where I would say that this is one approach an ESL teacher used, whatever they used. You know, you have different things. That one about responsibility, gradual responsibility, or GIST. That's another one that's from our book. However you do those, I think that the value is in just reading it in your own words, and it's very direct, very user friendly. It's not bookie's. It's not complicated. It's not theoretical. It's very practical. So I want to kind of put those together in a booklet of some sort. I did share with you last week a handout on like one of these floppy little critical questions. I think it was this one, Maslow. About what kind of questions you can ask, knowledge level. So you could make your own booklet from that, I guess, but I hope that's of some value to you. I also am going to share something, and I said it last weekend, about a guy who is learning languages and how he went about doing it. It's really extraordinary. It's about an hour-long video, very compelling, and he has crashing in the video at several points. So it is good theoretical basis, although it may not be practical in every sense. Differentiation, and this is something I'm always if you're going to get excited about anything in ESL, I like differentiation. I want to first of all say that you don't differentiate every lesson, every time, every level. You do it when it works on occasion, because most people get very upset about it. Some people do, and they say, I can't do 4 different lesson plans. Well, obviously it takes a lot more preparation to do differentiation, but we're not talking about producing a lesson plan one time and then you have to produce another one the next day. The idea is that you build up, and once you get as well established through your examples, you have set up ways that you teach that are effective. You don't redo everything every year. You have practices that fit your personality. You have practices that work with your particular students in your particular school, and that's what you're going to stick with. And you can experiment with those, but you don't have to do radical things. Now, I like differentiation because it's intellectually very challenging. Now, there are different types of differentiation, and I want to mention that one of those is about learning profile. It's mentioned in this book. I'm giving you some handouts from 3 chapters in the book. They're short chapters by Tomlinson. This book's no longer printed, but and there's several different ways you can differentiate. The ones I emphasize are the following. Content. So you may have an American history book you're teaching and it's too difficult. So you get a reader or another way of teaching it, or maybe you use a combination of videos or handouts, and you make it more accessible to the students. Maybe their reading level's the issue. Their readiness can also play a role in this. Or it could be that they're not very interested and you're trying to appeal to their interest levels. But generally, one of the ways that we generally call it content. So I may have a lighter vocabulary load, And so I choose that book for students. Another thing I may do is I may have the content. I could also go up on the spectrum. I can make it more difficult or more challenging for students that may be able to do much harder work and are interested in reading in great depth about American history. So they may do reports, or they may do some kind of a presentation, or they may even come up with a play about something. I mean, creativity counts a lot in differentiation. It is not more homework. You don't tell people to do twice as many book reports as the people that do the regular load and call that the gifted or the advanced or whatever. And you don't give silly mechanical assignments like word searches in place of understanding the concepts you're teaching about American history. Same thing with math, same thing with science, different types of cells, plant and animal cells. Some people would have them make models. Now I'm going to get into another example. Instead of content, you could have students have a different, they could produce a different product. So you may have some students produce a model of an animal cell. Okay, other students produce a model of a plant cell. Now, you may have a more advanced group actually work with a plant cell. Maybe they make a slide with it, or they highlight the parts of the plant cell. And it's technologically more difficult to do because they have to be able to manipulate slides and cells and things like that, or maybe slice them or something. And so that means the process is different. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm slipped over in the process. That means they have a different product. So they produce slides. Other groups produce a model. You may have other groups operating on a more basic level. You may give them something else that they can do, but it may not be as sophisticated. So the product they produce, if they're making a model, won't be as sophisticated as the ones that make a more sophisticated model. So product can be this. Now, one of the best examples, and I think it's on the high school video, is somebody was doing an art class and they wanted to compare two artists in the way they did their art. And they said, we're going to compare, Da Vinci with Michelangelo, or who's the guy? I like Edward Hopper. I have some of his pictures in my office, not the originals, of course. I keep those at home. But so we have Edward Hopper, and he does a lot of pictures of people that are in lonely places. I've got one over there. I don't know if you can see it. There it is. Two of them right there together. Three of them right there together on the wall. And there you see he works with shadows, and that one is called Approaching a City, the one where it has a tunnel. And then the other one is called Automat, and that used to be where you would go into places and you put your money in, and they would serve food, but it was just through a mechanical refrigerated dispenser, and you would see it and you'd press a button, and then you'd get your pie or you get your sandwich or whatever it was. And that's how people operated. And they're always kind of people in those places usually are eating alone. You may have seen the joke about the Nighthawks. That's the people that are, I don't know if you've seen it, but if you look up Edward Hopper Nighthawks and then put Nighthawks and then put coronavirus with it, we always look for humor in the worst situations. And it shows this late night restaurant with everybody, 3 or 4 people are there and they're getting coffee. That's the original painting. But then we get the original, and then we get the updated one, coronavirus, and it shows the place is empty. The lights are on, nobody's there. Even the coffee machine's gone. So anyhow, so you can have students do different types of products. So their final assignment is different. Doesn't mean it's not serving the purpose of instruction, but you're adjusting it to the ability of the students to do the activity. Now, the one example that I remember, and I think it's on the high school, is they have people compare, they're actually doing pop-up cards. The cards, you open them and they pop up. You know, some of them have music, but maybe like the little castle raises up when you open the card, or they even have books like that. So some of them do cards. That's the basic product. Some of them do pop-up books, okay? And some of them, or they're smaller. Oh, now I remember, it wasn't pop-up books is the really tough one. The lowest level, or they don't pop up, but they're slides. You can slide papers in among each other because you're not very good at cutting. I would never know how to do a pop-up book. I'd have to be tutored by an art teacher for some time to even get started. But so you produce 3 different products, and they're really cool. And the students are interested, and they're interested in these 2 artists. They do research, and they have to compare the artists, and they combine them into one, like one side of the page versus how the other guy would do it. So they're interpreting how the artist would do it. So they're really studying the artist. And, you know, Andy Warhol with a Campbell soup can, that was in the 60s, that was big. And then you go back further in time, you got my friend here, Edward Hopper with The Lonely Places. He would have a pop-up book, but it might have one person in an isolated room somewhere. So it'd be very, and the bodies aren't drawn very accurately. So it's not like it's figure drawing at its best. Instead, the focus is on these people that are isolated in lonely places, like I am now. In fact, Edward Hopper is like the king of the isolation ward, I think, because it's always people. I can show you pictures on my wall, but I can't really turn it this way. I don't want to take it off. It's too much. They always show people isolated in lonely places. It's very appealing, especially now. So you have products. And then another one that you can differentiate is the process. So you got a process. What would the process be? Well, in an art class, the process would also be product. I mean, you'd make different product, but maybe you'd have everybody make a ceramic bowl or a ceramic pot of some kind, but they use different techniques. They all produce a pot, but some do the real primitive one where people just, you know, you just make a rope of clay and then you just build up the pot around the sides and try to smooth it down and then put the lacquer on there. And you do stuff with your thumbs, and it's kind of like what I would produce. I did pots like that, and they were never symmetrical because I didn't know what that was. They were always brown. They looked like they'd been used in a bad way. Ashtrays are very common. But then you get people that can use a spinning wheel and a potter's wheel, and they're able to shape an actual pot. And then maybe the more advanced ones might use a different process for the glazing or something. So you do get a different product, but you are all producing pots. It's not like you're producing something totally different. So you can have a mix. You can have a process being different. The one I remember is that they were doing an experiment on, I think this is in the high school video. They're doing an experiment on what happens to create fog. Is it warm water? Is it warm air over cold water? What causes that? And so the most advanced group actually has to examine an unusual fog that forms over a certain bay in California. And they have to understand what is the cause of it. And they have like different things that come up. One of them is there's a nuclear power plant about a mile away or 5 miles away. Another one is the current coming in, the Humboldt current or something. So they got all these different possible reasons for it, and they have to go through and think about what is causing the fog. So that is a deep research and ask a lot of questions, very intense. More for the more advanced science students who are into critical thinking. Now there's another one where they do a basic experiment, and all they do is they measure the water temperature at different levels. When they put in ice into water, how does the ice cause the temperature of the water to change at what depth? And the reason they change that is process, because the regular group has to set up all their equipment and get their thermometers placed in the right place. They have to learn how to do all of it. Now, the group that is not sophisticated enough to follow this, because it's actually pretty complicated, would be to me, is they actually have a computer and everything is already set up. So in a sense, they get a lot of stuff done for them, but they're not able. And you think if you had students that didn't have the capacity or couldn't manipulate all this stuff, or you had a student with didn't have vision or something, you'd have to set it up so it's accessible to them. So then you might set up the experiment, and then the students would get graph, and then the computer would help actually create the graph. So you take a lot of the worry out of the work. You know, if I were building a house this way, I would need somebody to come out, frame the house for me, put in the drywall, and basically just give me the paint, and I'll paint the wall, because that's about all I'm capable of. But if you work with, what you do is you have to know your students to do differentiation. And what I like about differentiation is that you're actually thinking about what is going to stimulate the student. You don't go and say, oh, this, because sometimes, here's the irony of it, you're going to find students that people might think intellectually don't quite have the capacity to do this, but you can't assume that, because one of the best examples I've ever seen, it was on video, is an advanced student working with a young lady that had a lot of intellectual limitations. And it was a mixed group, because he would just pairs. He was working with her, and they were working on a project, and they worked so well together. They liked each other. There was a deep friendship. And this is something you can't get from a test. It's from human relationships. And she stimulated him, and then he taught her. It was a beautiful thing. Taught compassion and empathy. And I remember that example, because it wasn't something out of a textbook or predictable. It's the things you observe as a teacher about human relationships. So, okay, so those are the three. You got content, you got process, and you got product. Watch those examples. I'm going to add a couple examples myself. I'm going to look around to see what I think. You don't have to watch all these videos again. You're going to watch this video because I know I'm terribly exciting. But that's about it. And then we're going to have a discussion. And I know I've got you working on, I've told you to go ahead and work on your unit and just blend your lesson into the unit. I'm going to be looking at your interviews. I haven't heard a lot from people lately. I've asked about you talking to my students in my other class, because now we're all online. But I hope everyone's doing well. I'm get a little nervous. I want to hear from a couple of people. The world is weird, and so I just want you to know that that I'm thinking about you, and that please share anything you need to share. If anything comes up, let me know about that too, because this is not the most important thing in the world. This class is just about 4th or 5th on the list of important things in the world right now. You take care of yourself, your health, your family, and also those that have lost jobs. That's impacting not me directly, but my kids. So I'm worried about that, and hope that everyone gets along. I'll throw in a few extra things if I need to, but I'll call it good for now. So take care, and be safe. Be very safe.